You see, this world is full of guides, but few know where they're going. The loudest shouts often come from the most lost souls. People have forgotten how to listen to themselves. They chase the crowd, bow to slogans of righteousness, goodness, success, and think that's living. They no longer ask what's real, only what's acceptable. And so the human spirit gradually withers, because living by someone else's will is a slow death. There are types of people who extinguish the fire within others, not because they're evil, but because they make the soul stop burning. Following them means forgetting the primal power of your own being, dozing off in the safety of the herd. The world doesn't need more new prophets or saviors, it needs fewer followers. What's needed are people who dare to stand alone, dare to doubt every authority, dare to burn old beliefs, to kindle their own light. Because only when you stop following anyone do you begin to be. Awakening doesn't come from reading philosophy, believing in a philosopher, or memorizing lofty words. Awakening arrives the moment the curtain falls, when every notion of morality, ideals and progress suddenly reveals itself as nothing more than the sophisticated makeup of collective fear. For ages, people have learned to live like actors in a play whose author no one knows, each repeating pre-written lines, switching roles to suit the audience, and calling that life. They passionately argue over right and wrong, good and evil, yet no one dares ask who set these rules and for what purpose. They bow before symbols while forgetting they were once free. When the curtain drops, everything that once seemed noble, honor, justice, faith, turns hollow, and the soul begins to tremble before the truth. It's not the world that's false, but people who have deceived themselves to stay comfortable. At that point, comfort becomes a prison, and solitude becomes the path. Anyone who has tasted that moment knows the truth isn't found in the crowd, doesn't ring out in applause, but hides in the silence of daring to be different. The majority has never been right, because the majority always chooses safety over honesty. Awakening is the loneliest journey, yet it's where freedom begins, where a person dares to question instead of believe, dares to walk alone instead of seeking a guide. Freedom isn't born from opposing the world, but from stopping the pretense of agreeing with it. And when the gaze becomes clear, humanity's 5 greatest illusions gradually take shape: the hypocrite, the power-drunk, the fear-monger, the preacher of empty happiness, and the one cloaked in knowledge. Those 5 shadows surround the human soul like the final curtains. The hypocrite doesn't realize that their morality is born from fear, from the need to be seen as right, to be approved, to belong. They invoke goodness to avoid facing the natural shadow within themselves, the part everyone has but few dare to look at. They need evil people to sustain the illusion that they are good, need sinners to feel saintly. Their world is divided into 2 colors, white and black, heaven and hell, right and wrong, and what they fear most is the gray where nothing is certain. They erect the concept of sin like a fence, not to protect morality, but to keep the soul from taking responsibility for its own instincts. When people start believing their nature is wicked, that instincts must be chained, morality becomes gilded handcuffs. In that view, Nietzsche called it slave morality, the kind born from the fear of the weak, yet praised as virtue. It turns obedience into dignity, turns submission into humility, turns cowardice into love. Those who carry that morality believe they're saving the world, but in truth they're killing the most vibrant part of humanity, the ability to define good for oneself. When good becomes law, it's no longer good, it's just soulless repetition. When people do right, only because they fear doing wrong. They've lost their soul. They're not honest. They're just obedient. They're not kind. They just want to be praised as kind. And in that game, the good they preach becomes a tool of power. Whoever defines good rules over others' fear. But true good doesn't lie in obedience. It sprouts from absolute honesty with one's being, even when that honesty angers the whole world. An honest soul may err, may be misunderstood, but it lives. An obedient soul merely exists as a shadow. Hypocrites don't kill people with swords, but with smiles. They make you believe living right means living safe, that peace is holiness, that rebellion is sin. They make you fear your own capacity for freedom. And so people shrink to fit the good mold. Society builds, gradually losing the ability to judge for themselves, only knowing to look into others' eyes for value. Once people need applause to do right, good has become a commodity. Those obsessed with power always speak of truth, but what they truly crave is influence. They do not create new strength. They only learn to harvest the energy of others by awakening fear and then controlling it. To them, truth is merely a tool, morality is just a disguise, and power is the true religion. They appear everywhere, in politics, in religion, in movements called awakening, and though they wear many faces, their essence remains unchanged. They want to dominate, not to liberate. They know that the crowd fears freedom more than slavery, so they give the crowd the false comfort called the guide. They say, "I know the way," and the crowd kneels, feeling saved because they no longer have to choose for themselves. Their power is born from the mental laziness of others. They need weary souls to exist. The herd loves them for being directed, for feeling part of something grand, for hiding behind the collective role without personal responsibility. But the herd has never created freedom. It only creates new leaders, and every leader needs someone to bow to survive. To them, people do not mature. They only change masters. Human history is a loop of the same tragedy. The crowd stones the old idol, then carves a new idol from the same stone. When the crowd needs a lord, they always choose the one who shouts loudest, not the one who sees deepest. Every society collapses from within, not due to a lack of leadership, but because independent souls have surrendered their will to the collective cry. When consensus becomes the highest value, thought falls silent, and the soul dissolves into the crowd. There are no great leaders, only great individuals who know how to lead themselves. Those who need to be led will forever be led. Those who fear standing alone will forever be controlled. True power does not lie in making Logitech others submit, but in standing firm without needing anyone to submit. Those obsessed with power, those who so fear, do not rule with power, but with warnings. They speak in anxious whispers, teaching don't take risks, don't be different, don't stray from the proven safe path. Anything new unsettles them, for the unknown is the land where they lose control. They cloak their fear in a mantle of morality, turning timidity into wisdom, cowardice into humility. They advise people to bow before fate and call it acceptance. They teach people to shrink into smallness and call it modesty. Safety is a virtue, they say, but in truth it is surrender painted over. They call resignation faith, avoidance peace, paralysis prudence. To them, stability matters more than truth. Those who follow them will live a quiet life, but meaningless will die in consensus, never knowing what it means to live. They claim the world out there is dangerous, that adventure is a sin, that desire is shameful. They forget that every living thing is born from chaos and pain, that life itself is a sacred gamble. They believe staying small avoids suffering, but that very contraction is the root of all suffering. Fear is a silent shadow, and those who fail to see it will soon be swallowed by it. Nietzsche called it the spirit of the long night, the thing that ages people before they truly live. It leaves eyes open but souls closed, mouths preaching virtue, while hearts no longer dare to pound. The fearmongers build prisons with beautiful advice. They need no chains for the imprisoned, lock their own doors with their obedience. They will convince you that daring to dream is dangerous, daring to differ is arrogance, daring to speak truth is rudeness. And if you listen, you will learn to walk softly, speak quietly, think small to stay safe. But staying safe is not living, and the peace bought with fear is the most refined form of death. No wisdom is born from fear, no freedom comes from evasion. Freedom is not the absence of danger, but the place where will is stronger than fear. Humans are not born for safety, but to reach beyond their own limits. Every time fear tells you to stop, it is the sign you stand at the threshold of growth. There are those who turn peace into a religion, teaching that one must always be positive, must forgive, must smile, even as the soul rots from within. They don't speak of truth, they speak of comfort. They fear storms, so they build flowery words to hide their own trembling. They advise people to forget pain instead of understanding it, teach how to silence emotions instead of listening to them, and call that numbness enlightenment. The happiness they preach is fake happiness, not built on strength, but on avoidance. It's not light, it's a thin mist, draped over an abyss. They say everything is fine just to avoid facing what can't be controlled. They praise peace, but their peace is death, wrapped in velvet, the silence of those who no longer dare to feel. Easy joy is a sign of decline, for no one becomes great by seeking only warmth. True vitality lies not in forced smiles, but in the ability to endure the storm while keeping the heart beating. Those who avoid suffering avoid growth. Those who fear tragedy will never touch deep joy. They want a flat life, but that very flatness leaves the soul with no foothold to rise. They call abandoning desire, letting go, call emotional numbness serenity. But the soul was born not to sleep peacefully, but to blaze, to rise and fall, to shatter and be reborn. True peace is not escaping chaos, but standing firm within it. It's the state of one who knows storms are necessary, that without suffering, people would never know love. Those who preach empty happiness don't make the soul safer, they only make it weaker. They lull people with gentle words until the fire within dies out. Don't follow those who make you comfortable. Listen to those who make you feel alive, who make you restless, who remind you that you're still breathing. True happiness lies not in avoiding pain, but in daring to open your heart to the full truth of existence, light and darkness, love and loss, laughter and tears. Only when the soul no longer fears pain can it know what joy truly is. The one draped in the cloak of knowledge is the image of this era, where people worship the mind and forget the heart. They talk a lot about will, yet they themselves are imprisoned by the will of intellect. They think reading is understanding, remembering is knowing, arguing is living. They quote Nietzsche, Socrates, Kant like incantations, but their souls vibrate with nothing. They fear error more than falsehood, fear contradiction more than pretense. They speak of life, but don't know how to live, speak of freedom but dare not break any of their own limits. Knowledge, if not transformed into experience, becomes a spiritual chain. It binds people in the illusion of understanding, making them believe the mind can replace real life. They turn philosophy into a cold laboratory where every idea is dissected until it dries up and dies. Meanwhile, true philosophy is not a subject, but an art of living, where thought must be forged in the fire of action, where understanding has value only when it changes how we breathe, love, endure and create. The one cloaked in knowledge lives in vast concepts, but their heart shrinks. They build temples to reason and kill the intuition within. They think they're free because they don't believe in religion, yet they've created a new religion called knowledge. They bow to doctrines not out of faith, but out of fear of facing the void, when no framework remains to lean on. They view life through a microscope and think they've seen the whole. They forget that true understanding lies not in separating from life, but in merging with it. Nietzsche once called them those who count drops but don't know how to swim. They live in words, but their speech has no soul. They lecture on love as a formula, on life as an equation, and thus never touch the pulse of real living. They believe everything can be explained, and in that effort, they've killed the mystery, the very thing that makes life worth living. Knowledge that doesn't become creative power is just the cold ash of old thought. Living thought is thought that sheds its skin, that burns itself to birth new meaning. Dead knowledge is what endlessly repeats others' words, thinking it's thinking when it's only chewing the memories of centuries past. Don't follow those who only teach you to think. They'll turn you into a talking head. Seek those who make you dare to act, dare to shatter concepts and rebuild them with your own experience. For true thought lives only when it tastes risk, failure, and rebirth in life itself. The one who understands Nietzsche isn't the one who memorizes what he wrote, but the one who dares to live in his spirit, the one who treats. The 5 types of people above are not enemies, but mirrors reflecting humanity's eternal weaknesses. Within every person lies a part of the hypocrite who wants to be praised as good, a part of the power seeker who wants control, a part of the fearful who wants protection, a part of the complacent who wants peace, and a part of the intellectual who wants to understand instead of live. No one completely escapes them, for they are the masks the soul wears when it fears the light. Whenever people fear freedom, they seek someone to bow to. Whenever they tire of their own being, they choose an idol to follow, to hand over the burden of self-determination. But every idol eventually becomes a prison, and every worship begins with reverence, but ends in slavery. People are intoxicated by bowing before grand figures, because bowing is easier than standing upright. They seek teachers, doctrines, leaders, because they fear the answer that there is no one but themselves. Nietzsche called it the addiction of the slave, always wanting others to dictate how to live, always needing another hand to steer one's will. They fear the void of freedom more than the pain of chains. But no saint, no leader, no philosopher has the power to live another's soul. Each person must take responsibility for their own life, must kindle their own flame. Every philosophy, every religion, every doctrine is only a map. If one dares not walk, the map will rot in their hands. True awakening does not lie in finding the perfect guide, but in ceasing the search entirely. When one stops asking who is right, the mind becomes quiet enough to hear the real question, what within me is waiting to be born? And in that moment, the soul touches freedom, not from knowledge, belief or idols, but from the courage to live true to one's essence. The world doesn't need more followers, it needs more free souls. It doesn't need more philosophers, but people who dare to live philosophy, to turn thought into flesh and blood, to turn knowledge into action. Don't wait for anyone's blessing, and don't seek anyone's approval. No canonization is higher than honesty with oneself. no forgiveness greater than daring to be yourself. In a world that demands sameness, create your own values, even if the price is solitude. Because solitude is not punishment, it is where the soul is reborn. A human life is not measured by the number of times it is applauded, but by the degree of courage to be authentic. The crowd's approval is the cheapest reward, and the highest price to earn it is the loss of self. Let the noise around you fall away, leaving silence in which the soul's voice can rise for the first time without being drowned out. Remember, the caterpillar must dissolve to become a butterfly, the seed must crack to become a tree, and a human to truly live must dare to die within their old mold. All evolution begins with collapse. All light must pass through darkness to be born. So do not fear loss, do not fear transformation, do not fear being misunderstood. The death of the old is the promise of new life, and you don't need to follow Nietzsche, just understand what he once wished for, a soul that dares to become its own standard. When people stop looking for masters and instead become masters of their own lives, humanity truly matures. Freedom does not come from breaking every bond, but from realizing that no bond is stronger than the fear within. When fear dissolves, people no longer need permission. They light their own torch and walk. That is the beginning of freedom and the end. If these thoughts resonate with you, please subscribe to continue the journey toward inner enlightenment and spiritual freedom. Thank you for listening. See you in the next sharing, where we delve deeper into the power of the free soul.